Interior Design Masters with me, Alan Carr. Starts Tuesday at 8 on BBC Two and iPlayer.
Now on BBC One, Sophie Rayworth with the BBC News at 10.
Tonight at 10, the EU introduces new controls to give member states the power to stop coronavirus vaccines from being exported to countries including the UK. And in a move sparking fury, the EU has overridden part of the Brexit deal to stop the vaccine getting into Britain through Northern Ireland.
Well, I think it's quite incredible. It's an act of aggression, actually. Less than a month into us leaving the European Union, we see them act in this unilateral way.
Tonight, the Prime Minister is drawn into the row. He's spoken to the EU Commission President and expressed his grave concerns over the potential impact on the export of the vaccines. Also tonight, another COVID vaccine, the second in 24 hours, proves effective after major trials. The Janssen jab is effective at preventing serious illness. A government expert says it's a big step forward.
It means that we can spread the vaccine around. It means that we can really start to impact on this pandemic, not just here, but right the way across the world.
Some primary school children in Wales could be back in the classroom after half-term if infection rates continue to fall. And the trailblazing African-American actress Cicely Tyson has died at the age of 96.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, Dina Asher-Smith makes a winning return to international athletics as she storms to 60-metre victory at the World Indoor Tour event in Germany.
Good evening. The Prime Minister has expressed grave concerns and says the European Union must urgently clarify its intentions over its decision to temporarily override part of the Brexit deal as the row intensifies with AstraZeneca over a shortfall in supplies. The EU has introduced new controls giving member states the power to block exports of the coronavirus vaccine to countries including the UK should they want to. Under the Brexit deal, all products should be exported from the EU to Northern Ireland without checks. But by overriding part of it, the EU is ensuring the UK wouldn't get supplies through a back door. It has sparked fury in Northern Ireland. The First Minister, Arlene Foster, called the EU's move an incredible act of hostility. Here's our Brussels correspondent, Nick Beake.
This post-Brexit battle between the EU and a British-based vaccine maker has been intensifying. Tonight, it became much more political. European countries are demanding that AstraZeneca delivers all the jabs they ordered, even if it means taking them from the UK's supply. It all hangs on the contract the two sides signed that's now been released, although with some parts blacked out. AstraZeneca says it agreed to make a best reasonable effort. The EU insists it was a legally binding promise, and so has now announced if it doesn't get all the supplies it asked for, it could block COVID vaccines leaving Europe, those heading for countries including the UK.
We have to be very clear, and we have said it many times before. We are not protecting ourselves against any specific country, and we're not in competition or in a race against any country. The only race we're in is against this virus.
But to make sure vaccines don't enter mainland Britain through Northern Ireland, which remains in the EU's single market for goods, Brussels is looking to override part of the Brexit deal, a move denounced by Northern Ireland's First Minister.
Here we have the European Union triggering Article 16 in relation to a vaccine which is there to save lives, actually. So it is an incredible state of affairs, but it shows to me that all of their words around protecting Northern Ireland and protecting the Belfast Agreement were just that, words.
And Downing Street says it's urgently seeking an explanation from Brussels and would not expect a friend and ally to disrupt its vaccine arrangement. The European Union is taking a really tough line in this COVID row, but at the same time it's facing heavy criticism for the slowness of its vaccination rollout. It's much slower than the UK's. Throughout this pandemic, Brussels has insisted that all 27 countries need to work together when it comes to getting hold of jabs. So far, it's not worked well. Because this is a rare sight in cities like Madrid. Thousands of other vaccine appointments have had to be postponed. There have been delays with the Belgian-made Pfizer jab too. On the day Europe's medicines regulator approved the AstraZeneca vaccine, the company said it was ready to ship millions of jabs to Europe and was topping up its supply from other parts of the world. Downing Street has insisted the delivery of jabs in all parts of the UK will not be affected by this deepening row.
I'm not going to comment on the EU's own discussions with those manufacturers. What we need to focus on is making sure that UK residents and the NHS here gets the vaccines that's required. And as I say, we're confident that we will be receiving what we expected in the days and weeks ahead.
This morning, a senior European official accused Boris Johnson's government of wanting to start a vaccine war. Tonight, the very same charge is being levelled at the EU. Nick Beake, BBC News, Brussels.
In a moment, we'll be speaking to Emma Vardy in Northern Ireland. But first, let's talk to our Europe editor, Katya Adler, in Brussels. And this row is really escalating tonight. Boris Johnson has now spoken to the EU Commission President.
Well, that's absolutely right, Sophie. The European Commission President has also spoken to the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, as well. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, the language around Northern Ireland tonight. But just before speaking to you, I've heard from an EU source that actually the Commission is going to backtrack. It is not going to suspend part of the Irish protocol, part of that Brexit agreement that, of course, we spent so long talking about how the Commission was insisting on every letter, every word of that agreement being respected. Privately, I'm being told that it's been recognised here that suggesting to do that was actually a misjudgment and an error. And I think, Sophie, it just goes to show the chaos here at the moment surrounding the EU's vaccine rollout, because even with those extra sort of permissions needed for vaccine exports out of the EU that we were hearing from Nick, the EU is risking alienating other allies like Japan or Canada or Australia that could be affected by those export restrictions. And it's not enough to say that, yes, OK, we know that pharmaceutical companies are not delivering the numbers of vaccines in the time they promised to the EU, and the EU sees this as an emergency situation. It wants to claw back some of those vaccines. But the finger of blame is also pointing by EU governments by now at the European Commission itself, accusing the Commission of just being too slow to agree vaccine contracts, of approving vaccines themselves. And yes, now with these vaccine delays, you have EU voters, they're anxious about their future, they want answers and they want action.
Katya, thank you. And let's talk to Emma Vardy in Belfast. So this story moving very quickly tonight, but that will come as a huge relief if the EU does indeed backtrack on it.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be welcomed on all sides here, because there was great concern all round with the DUP, Sinn Féin and the Irish government seemingly, all very much taken by surprise on this. And that's because what it would have done is effectively create a border on the island of Ireland when it came to vaccines. And that was the sacrosanct thing that was to be avoided in all the Brexit negotiations and the Brexit arrangements that the EU had pushed so hard for. So, yeah, the EU sort of changing course tonight, stepping back from this, just shows how sensitive these things can be in Northern Ireland and the kind of reaction that they can provoke here. But, still a point of principle is still at stake here, because there's a lot of people in Northern Ireland very unhappy with the Brexit arrangements because of the disruption to trade it causes in terms of getting goods over the Irish Sea. So there will be some unionists now pushing very hard for the UK government to say, well, look, override parts of the Brexit deal on our side that you don't like, because if the EU was prepared to do it, well, then why can't we?
Emma Vardy and Katya Adler, thank you both. A second vaccine has shown to be effective in major trials in just 24 hours. The latest is the Janssen vaccine. It's 66% effective overall and only needs a single dose. And crucially, it is 85% effective against severe disease. Last night, Novavax announced UK trials had shown its vaccine to be 89% effective. And crucially, that vaccine protects against the new, more contagious UK variant. If approved, the UK has millions of doses of both vaccines on order, though they wouldn't be available until later in the year. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, reports.
COVID vaccine trials keep delivering results beyond all expectations. These volunteers in Southampton are among tens of thousands worldwide testing the vaccine from Janssen, part of the pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson, which will produce 1 billion doses of its jab this year.
We have a single-shot vaccine which can protect very highly 85% against severe disease and complete protection against death and hospitalization after day 28. And that's a finding which was across the world in all the regions, independent of age and independent of strain.
The results from the US biotech Novavax are nothing short of spectacular. This site in London, part of a UK-wide trial, which showed the vaccine offered strong protection even against the contagious new variant, first identified in Kent.
It's very significant because we were able to show that the vaccine works well against both the original strain, and the new strain. It had 96% efficacy against the original COVID-19 strain, and yet it still had 86% efficacy against the variant strain.
So how do they work? The Novavax jab uses proteins from the surface spike of coronavirus and combine these with a chemical booster or adjuvant. The Janssen vaccine puts the gene for the spike protein into a harmless virus, a similar approach to the Oxford AstraZeneca jab. Both vaccines prime the immune system, including creating antibodies which will target coronavirus in the event of infection. The Novavax jab will be manufactured on Teesside, part of a deal struck last year to ensure a steady flow of vaccine. The UK has ordered 100 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and 40 million of Pfizer's. Both of these are in limited supply at the moment. The 17 million doses of Moderna's vaccine won't arrive until the spring. Then there's the 2 vaccines which have just yielded results. 60 million doses of the Novavax jab, they'll take a few months to be delivered, plus 30 million of the single-dose Janssen vaccine. Now, if those last 2 are approved, that'll be enough doses to immunise the entire UK population twice over. Later this year, the UK is likely to have such a surplus of COVID vaccine, it may be giving it away. But for the next few months, supply will be tight.
2 more vaccines to add to the toolbox. This gives more resilience and more tools, new tools that were different from the last ones. It means that we can spread the vaccine around. It means that we can really start to impact on this pandemic, not just here, but right the way across the world.
Are you ready? Yeah.
Vaccinating one country in a pandemic is like putting a sticking plaster on a gaping wound. Until the whole world is protected, none of us truly will be. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
It's exactly a year ago this weekend since the first 2 people with coronavirus were treated in hospital in the UK. The head of NHS England, Sir Simon Stevens, marked the moment with a visit to the hospital in Newcastle where they were treated to thank staff all over the country for a year of extraordinary work like no other. Since those first 2 patients were admitted, more than 320,000 people have been treated with COVID, with about 1 person admitted to critical care every 30 minutes. Our health editor Hugh Pym reports.
A year ago, high drama, planes bringing in the first Britons from Wuhan in China. No one knew if they had coronavirus or not. Passengers were moved swiftly off the plane and taken on coaches to a hospital to quarantine. A short time before that, a foreign student called NHS 111 from a hotel room in York. He was studying at the city's university and was suffering high fever and a cough. His mother, also staying there, felt unwell. Both were taken to a hospital near Hull, then to Newcastle's Royal Victoria Infirmary, the UK's first known coronavirus cases. At the hospital today, staff recalled the arrival of those 2 patients.
I think we were always aware that this was only the beginning of something really big, but I'm being honest, I didn't think it was going to be that big. I didn't expect that we had, at this time, over 100,000 deaths.
I was in the first day. It was very scary, really nervous because we didn't know what we were coming into. It was the first thing in my mind was, what are we going to be doing? What are these patients going to be like? Are they well? Are they not well?
The head of NHS England was there to thank staff for their work in those early days.
Since then, hospitals have looked after more than 300,000 severely ill coronavirus patients. And so I do think at this one-year anniversary, it is appropriate for the whole country to say a huge thank you to every member of staff across the health service.
Case numbers now seem to have peaked. The daily reported total covering those who've gone for tests is falling. But the Office for National Statistics survey does random community testing and picks up those who don't have symptoms. The ONS survey suggests that case rates have levelled off but are still relatively high. In England last week, 1 in 55 had the virus. In Wales, it was 1 in 70. In Scotland, 1 in 110. And in Northern Ireland, it's thought that 1 in 50 had the virus. This shows the UK's infection hotspots. Red followed by dark brown show areas with the highest number of cases per 100,000 population. And the highest of those was Knowsley, followed by Sandwell and Slough, though all have seen case rates fall over the most recent week. But there's still immense pressure on the NHS. Staff are preparing for their shifts, facing the daily challenge of caring for very sick COVID patients, some of whom won't survive. There are still more than 35,000 in UK hospitals. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, let's take a look now at the latest government figures. There were 29,079 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means that on average the number of new cases reported per day in the last week is 26,987. That's almost 30% lower than this time last week. The number of people in hospital is falling slowly, with an average of 35,375 over the 7 days to Wednesday, including suspected cases in Wales. 1,245 deaths were reported. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average, in the past week, 1,199 deaths were announced every day. The total number of deaths so far across the UK is now 104,371. But the number of people being vaccinated has been published, and it's the highest figure this week. 443,985 people have had their first dose of one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines in the latest 24-hour period, meaning almost 7.9 million people in the UK have now had their first jab. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, is with me now. Are we starting to turn a corner?
Well, Sophie, senior health officials say yes, they think a corner has been turned. Things are coming down, but they don't know how rapidly. Now, those daily reported cases are down 30% week on week. Hospital admissions are down 14%. But those cases cover people who've gone for a test, as we've been hearing the broader surveys like the ONS taking people without symptoms who don't know they've got the virus. And those surveys show only a levelling off, not really any sign of a decline at this stage. And that is the source of some uncertainty. Senior officials think, yes, the vaccines will have an impact by mid to late February in terms of bringing cases and hospital numbers down. But you've only got to look and see what's been happening in Spain and Portugal, where cases are rising really rapidly, and in France, where having peaked in November and come down, they've started going back up again, to see how difficult it can be to keep a lid on this virus.
Hugh Pym, thank you. Well, France has announced tonight that it is closing its borders to all non-EU citizens from Sunday, except for essential travel. The move is to try to avoid another lockdown in France and to protect the country from new variants. But the British Transport Secretary says the move will not affect British hauliers and trade across the Channel will continue to flow. Some primary school children in Wales could begin returning to school from the 22nd of February after half-term if rates of coronavirus continue to fall. The First Minister, Mark Drakeford, said he hoped to take advantage of lower transmission rates in Wales and get children back to school as soon as possible. The level 4 lockdown will remain in place for the next 3 weeks. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith reports.
After several weeks of silence, these corridors may soon come bustling back to life. There are a few key worker children at Roath Park Primary at the moment. After half-term, if the COVID numbers keep falling, school can bring back all 3 to 7-year-olds who struggle most with learning at home. But do they feel ready?
Obviously, there's fears about the new variants of coronavirus and how quickly that spreads among staff. The First Minister has told us that younger children don't transmit the virus quite as much as the older children, but there's still a risk there, and we need to make sure as school leaders that our staff have confidence in the safety to bring them back into school.
When the vast majority of older pupils return hasn't been spelt out, the First Minister's keeping to his customary caution.
I wish I could tell you when I thought all children would be back in school, but as you know, even 3 weeks is a very long time with this virus. Things that we don't know about today could emerge even before half-term.
For Chanel, there is at least hope that she won't have to carry on juggling homeschooling her 6-year-old with her job as a home decorator. But she is worried about her daughter's safety.
Really relieved. For her mentality is the main focus, as well as her education. That's so important. But it is I am a bit anxious because it's still going on. The vaccines obviously haven't started just yet for our age group. So it is mixed emotions.
For most people, vaccination is still months away. The rollout in Wales started as the slowest in the UK, but things have sped up in the last week. This centre in Cardiff now delivers 1,000 doses a day.
People have said to me, it's like I've got the golden ticket, you know, I'm here. Some people are getting frustrated because their loved ones are not being vaccinated, but we are getting through people as quickly as we can.
The pace at which normal life can resume will inevitably be slow, but going back to school will be the first tentative step. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff.
The government is expecting around 300,000 people in Hong Kong who have British national overseas citizenship to migrate to the UK this year under a new scheme that opens this weekend. People in Hong Kong could apply for so-called BNO citizenship before the 1997 handover to China. It meant they could visit the UK for 6 months without a visa. The new system will allow these citizens and their close family to request to live and work in the UK for 5 years and ultimately to apply for British citizenship. They will be able to use a smartphone app to do so, which the Home Secretary Priti Patel said would give applicants greater security amid fears they could be targeted by the Chinese authorities. The new scheme was announced last year in response to a new national security law passed by Beijing that critics say has crushed dissent. This report from our correspondent Rebecca Henschke contains flashing images.
To leave or to stay and fight. Like many protesters in Hong Kong, this is the decision a man we're calling H has had to make. And he has decided to go.
I had never thought that I would become a refugee, but now that has happened. There's no other way. There are greater fears if I stay here and do not leave.
We're concealing his identity out of fears of a backlash from the authorities. H was born 2 years before Britain handed back Hong Kong to China, so he has a British national overseas passport, a document that now opens a pathway to UK citizenship for him. He drives to the airport, through a city where for over a year he took part in increasingly violent protests, demanding more democracy and less Chinese influence. A movement stopped by a sweeping national security law and the arrest of its young leaders. And H's mother feared for her only child.
When can we reunite? I may not be able to see him for the rest of my life, but his safety is most important.
Others like Ah Ching, H's friend, have decided to stay.
I want to persevere to the last moment. Giving up on our home where we were born and grew up is not what we wanted.
After making that decision, he took to the streets again. It was after the introduction of the national security law. He was swiftly detained for unauthorised assembly. Police didn't press charges against him. And despite the risks, he wants to keep fighting.
Even though we feel lost, we have to keep going. We can only see the light of hope if we persevere.
Having made the decision to go, H feels he may never be able to go back. His battle now is to try and build a new life in Sheffield, a very different place.
Looking at what's happening in Hong Kong, especially I'm now on the other side of Earth, I feel helpless. It is very difficult to have a concrete, long-term plan. It is inevitable to feel lost.
China accuses the UK of meddling in its internal affairs and in response announced it will no longer recognise BNO passports. Under the scheme, up to 5.5 million Hong Kongers have the right to move to the UK. They too have to make an agonising choice, to stay or to go. Rebecca Henschke, BBC News.
Our China correspondent John Sudworth is in Beijing. And what is this move by China? What is it likely to mean in practice?
Well, Sophie, from Sunday, holders of these British national overseas passports, like those we heard from in that report, can apply online for the new British visas that give them this route to eventual citizenship, all brought in, of course, in response to China's tightening political control over the former British colony. It's not immediately clear what this will mean, because although China has said it will no longer recognise these passports, we don't think that will stop Hong Kongers leaving the territory, because under existing regulations they can use their identification cards to do that. This all comes, of course, against the backdrop of a new US administration, China sending some pretty tough signals over Taiwan, for example, increasing military activity around that self-governing island, and yet also clearly being seen keen to calibrate it, not to do anything too provocative. So although there are no immediate practical implications, I think the fact that it comes with the threat of potential further action hints at maybe eventually closing off this route for Hong Kong citizens, and all adding, Sophie, to the sense of uncertainty.
John Sudworth, thank you. People waiting for urgent cancer surgery have had their operations cancelled at the last minute in some health trusts across the UK because hospitals are too busy coping with COVID patients. Hospitals say they're having to move nurses out of operating theatres onto COVID wards. Some of the most urgent surgeries are being rescheduled, but doctors are warning that delaying cancer treatment will cost lives. Our correspondent Emma Vardy has this report.
I'm just praying this is all going to be over really soon. It's hard enough having cancer without having to have cancer in the middle of a plague.
Throughout the pandemic, Claire's been having treatment in Scotland for breast cancer. Sometimes having to isolate in the bedroom at home, keeping away from her children to protect herself from the virus. After months of chemotherapy, Claire finished treatment and had just one more operation to go.
I'm not going to die.
But as the January surge in coronavirus cases came, Claire was told her potentially life-saving surgery had to be put on hold.
You feel desperate because there's lots of casualties falling by the wayside, and I worry all the time about the children. What will he have? Will he have a mum next year? I mean, Claire to us, he's our world.
NHS Scotland says it's now using private hospitals to help get the most urgent patients seen.
So this is Granda on his vegan diet with this special medication.
Macmillan Cancer Care estimates that more than 500,000 patients in the UK have had cancer treatment or care disrupted due to coronavirus.
I got a phone call to tell me that all operations were cancelled. So it was a bit of a slap in the teeth.
Vincent got the call on the day of his operation. In Northern Ireland, 2 health trusts have cancelled all urgent cancer surgery since Christmas. 275 red flagged cases cancelled within a week.
I just am so concerned because I can see such a big healthy man just going downhill.
Across the UK, there are lots of hospitals keeping surgery going, some having set up special hubs to protect cancer care. But cancer charities have also flagged up a large decrease in the number of patients being screened and diagnosed, which later on could also lead to a significant loss of life. And there's warnings that if COVID pressures continue, more trusts like Belfast may also have to push back urgent operations.
It's a decision that none of us would ever want to take. And we held off as long as we possibly could. We have to treat what is in front of you.
Surgeons say they want to be in operating theatres, not seeing their patients waiting. A lot of cancer surgeries for Belfast would have happened here at the City Hospital, but this is now the Nightingale facility for COVID patients. The Trust is trying to establish a new system for patients to be seen elsewhere, prioritising the most urgent cases. But the delays will affect people's chance of survival.
There will be a small but significant portion of people, when they come to surgery, it will be too late and the disease will have spread. And that, for us, is something that we never, ever, ever anticipated that we would be in our lifetime.
These are some of the hidden victims of coronavirus, also fighting for a chance of life.
So how'd you sleep last night, Granda?
Vincent's now been told his operation is being rescheduled. For him, the hope is it's still in time. For others, the wait goes on. Emma Vardy, BBC News.
And finally, the trailblazing Hollywood actress Cicely Tyson has died, aged 96. With a career spanning 7 decades, she made her breakthrough in the 1972 film Sounder, for which she was nominated for both a Golden Globe and an Oscar. Our arts editor, Will Gompertz, looks back at her life.
You've got you a low-life job, Mr. Sheriff.
Cicely Tyson in 1972 as Rebecca Morgan in Sounder, the Depression-era film for which she was nominated for an Oscar.
It's unique unto itself, Sounder, and rightfully has set a new trend in Hollywood.
What's wrong with you, Sounder?
She refused roles that belittled and disparaged black people, saying she'd rather starve. Instead, she broke new ground by playing strong, intelligent black women.
He ain't dead, no nothing.
In 1974, she starred in the television drama The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, in which she portrayed a 110-year-old ex-slave looking back on her life, a role that brought her 2 of her 3 Emmy Awards.
Still have 2 sons, Binta.
3 years later, she played Kunta Kinte's mother in the hit TV series Roots. Cicely Tyson was born in Harlem, New York in 1924. She was a shy young woman when spotted by a photographer, leading to a spell as a fashion model, before she embarked on what would be a 7-decade acting career, during which she married and divorced the jazz trumpeter Miles Davis. Her pioneering work as an actress was an inspiration for those who followed.
As a black woman in Hollywood at that time, she had to make her way out of no way. And that's a challenge to play the kind of roles she did with the elegance she did. I don't know how she pulled that off. It's a struggle. You know, I see young women today fighting to do the kinds of things that she got to do.
She continued to work well into her 90s, starring alongside James Earl Jones on Broadway and appearing in the TV series How to Get Away with Murder. In 2016, Barack Obama awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. 2 years later came an honorary Oscar. She was 93 years old.
What my life became is not what I expected. I had no idea that I would touch anybody.
Cicely Tyson was a brilliant, groundbreaking actress, about whom Vice President Kamala Harris tweeted tonight saying, "She broke barriers and inspired the world with her art, activism and altruism. Thank you for your wisdom. I will forever be grateful."
Cicely Tyson, who has died at the age of 96. That's it from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Good night.